Hello, boys and girls of the internet. I have returned from my brief online vacation, kind of making videos, but still live streaming. And I'm here to teach you tactics as always. Today we're talking about terrain analysis. Okay, we're going to be covering OCOCOA, the acronym, as we talk about terrain analysis. And if you're looking for that in military publications, it's going to be under METTC, which is under operational planning. Wonderful. So we have observation is our first O of OCOCOA. Okay, that's going to be typically high ground, but it doesn't have to necessarily be high ground. It's anything that allows observation of anything we deem as key terrain or the objective itself. All right. Often that will be high ground. Cover and concealment. All right. Cover is stuff that will stop bullets. Concealment is stuff that will stop somebody from seeing you. Okay. A bush is concealment. A concrete wall is cover. Most cover is also concealment. Concealment typically is not cover. Wonderful. Cover and concealment. Okay, these could be dead space, right? So if I'm on flat terrain and then there's a hill, I cannot see on the backside of that hill. So people could be staging or moving around on the backside of that hill, and I would not be able to observe them unless I achieved an elevated position, like on top of that hill, as our first note observation talked about. Okay. We want to use cover and concealment to allow us to maneuver into our attack position. All right. Obstacles. These can be natural or man-made. It can just be a patch of harsh terrain is an awesome obstacle. And this can be used to delay or deny the enemy access or advance. All right. Key terrain. This is a bit of a open terminology. Key terrain is just referring to anything that is critical to the mission. Okay, a lot of these different elements within OCOCOA could be considered key terrain if it's something that we need. It's anything that we have to take to complete the objective, or if we were to lose it, it would be detrimental to us and our mission. All right, so also a lot of times it is critical infrastructure such as comm shops or antennas, utilities, hospitals, headquarters, TOCs, and supply and storage locations. Often those are key terrain. Okay. Avenues of approach. This is anything that would allow more rapid movement than the rest of the terrain naturally would, right? So if I am on the flat land, right, if I'm just standing in the open grassland plain and then there's a road, even though anybody could walk or arguably drive across the grass, the road is going to allow people to drive at like 120 miles per hour, where you could not do that on the grass. So though the road is not the only place people can approach me from, it would still be the primary or most likely or most dangerous avenue of approach, where you would be fixated on, right? Similar concept, if I'm in a loosely wooded forest where anybody could walk from any direction, right? There's not such thick brush that prevents people from walking, but there's still a clear-cut path. That clear-cut path is still my avenue of approach. It doesn't mean I don't care about everything else. It just means that especially I care about. So it is not the only place somebody can walk through or every place that somebody can travel through. It is the place that is most likely to allow the highest level at the highest speed with the most amount of people to travel. All right. And then the last acronym there, W, is weather. Okay, so weather has an effect on a ton of different things, both the human and what you can do, and then thusly also machinery and equipment and what it can do, right? Like the global war on terror, the Taliban loved to fuck around during sandstorms because they knew we couldn't get air on station. Can't fly helicopters in a sandstorm. Similarly, you can't fly drones when it's a thunderstorm outside. Also, when it's intense rainfall or when it's extremely hot outside, right? Thermals don't work so good. So let your mind run wild on how you can use different weather patterns to your advantage. Even just being, if you're just tougher guys than the enemy, you can use inverse weather, whether it's really hot, really cold, rainy, snowstorm, whatever it is, right? If there's bad weather and that's going to make the other dudes be like, oh, this sucks, and like go internal and not try hard, not pay attention, and not focus on their sectors, but you and your dudes are going to be super locked on, then you can use that weather to your advantage, just because you can deal with the suck factor better than they can. All right. There's my brief overview of the textbook. Now, how do you actually use these concepts in real life? Okay. You want to control the high ground to maintain observation and fields of fire and deny the enemy cover and concealment. Okay. So if you're occupying the high ground, that means your fields of fire on the enemy are going to be more effective. You're going to have more fields of fire, which also another way of saying that is they have less access to usable cover and concealment. All right, so you're denying the enemy movement by simply occupying the high ground. You need to utilize cover and concealment to mask your movements as much as you can until you get to your attack or fighting positions. Okay? You want to occupy, whether that is by physical presence or by fire, avenues of approach or choke points, intersections, things like that, okay? Again, to deny the enemy freedom of movement, right? So if we're occupying a high ground, that's denying them the use of cover and concealment to mask their movement. I'm covering either by fires or by physically occupying avenues of approach, intersections, choke points, funnels, which means the enemy cannot move freely through those. They will be contested and fired upon when they move through them. Okay? We will defend our own key terrain while identifying and destroying or occupying the enemy's key terrain in order to eliminate their ability to conduct the fight. And we will utilize harsh terrain to protect ourselves and right, whether that is going to be incorporated into our defensive plan, right? Like they will not be able to attack from this place because the terrain is such that it blocks their attack, or it is so difficult they cannot pass through it. Or it is something like we're going to establish an ambush, and then if the enemy attempts to pursue us, they'll have to pursue us through a swamp where it's difficult to walk, or a field of cactus where it's difficult to walk, or uphill where it's difficult to walk, right? Etc., etc., so on and so forth. That would be to delay the enemy's advance, all right? So utilize harsh terrain in order to deny or delay the enemy's movement, and then incorporate that appropriately into your battle plans. Attack in bad weather to face complacent enemies and to eliminate some of their technological advantages they might have. Okay? Boom. And just to demonstrate how this applies at different scales, after I drink a sip of delicious water, just for you, Deborah, wherever you are, if you're still watching, I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to talk about how I would analyze and utilize terrain on the scale of a room, a building, and then just all of being outside in a rural area. Okay. So if I was in a room and it was a 2-on-1 situation and I had to, fight these two guys to the death and not let them leave, and also allow myself to have the ability to escape the room should I start to get overwhelmed by them, right? And not have them cut me off. Again, we're already starting to get into terrain analysis. I need to fight for access to the door, which is a choke point, is an avenue of approach, and now, in this situation, is key terrain, right? So I need to immediately make aggressive movements to occupy that door, and then I need to do something to funnel the enemy into me so that they're attacking me one at a time rather than two at a time, right? So if I need to utilize furniture, whether that's position myself around how the furniture or the room layout is so I have access to the door and I'm blocking them from leaving and they can't both attack me, or perhaps I have to knock furniture down or flip tables over, whatever it is, to prevent a choke point where if they want to be able to stand on solid ground and fight me, they're going to have to come through this funnel, which I am blocking the door. So I can leave when I want, they cannot, and they can only approach me one at a time. And I did that by establishing the terrain properly and putting myself in the proper position within that terrain. Okay, let's talk about home defense situation without trying to spill the beans too much and talk about the entire blueprint of my house. Right, there's like a kind of a T-shaped-esque walk area, main walkway of my house, with one of the wings of that T, the upper wings of that T, being open because it's like the living room. The T's off to my back door and my bedroom, both in kind of the same space. Right, the other wing is to the hallway to the front door, and then the long wing of the T is down the hallway with the kids' rooms. Pretty standard home layout. Okay. So if anytime there's a bump in the night, or if there should be a bump in the night, I'm going to immediately grab my gear and grab my rifle and exit my room, which puts me right immediately in the avenue of approach, the intersection, which is a major piece of key terrain, right? The key terrain would be my children's room primarily, secondarily would be my wife. And this avenue of approach connects all of that. So it itself also now becomes a piece of key terrain. So I immediately open my door and I can occupy with fire the upper portion of that T and see the main intersection where it wings off down the hallway, right? Open the door, first thing I see that. If I see any enemies, I will engage them. As soon as I am done engaging them, or if there is nobody, I will immediately begin to physically occupy that intersection. When I get to that intersection, I will then clear down that wing that I could not see with fires again. So I will visually look down that hallway. If there's enemy, I will engage them, and then I will physically dominate that piece of key terrain, which will allow me to gain access to the actual piece of key terrain, my children's room, which I will secure those children, and then based on the battle space, develop from there, right? The point is I'm utilizing that piece of key terrain being the hallway, the primary avenue of approach, choke point, and the intersection. Wonderful. All right, now if I was in a rural area and I wanted to establish an ambush, okay, I would want to identify the piece of key terrain, which is going to be where the supply lines normally run, right? So the avenue of approach that the supply chain normally traverses upon. I'm then going to try and find a piece of elevated terrain that lets me view that avenue of approach, and also has some harsh terrain that's going to delay in between that elevated position and that avenue of approach that's going to delay any advancing enemy, right? So I'm at an elevated position, I'm looking down on an avenue of approach, and I know that this area in between the two is obviously it's steep, right? Because I'm on an elevated position, but then also maybe it's swampy, maybe it's full of cactus, thorn bushes, maybe it's like tall grass and it's got a bunch of snakes in it or something, like a bunch of snakes in it. Maybe there is a river that's difficult to cross, or at least is going to cause people to slow down, right? So this is going to delay them, give me a chance to fire upon them, which is going to further delay them and give me a chance to egress from my position, all right? And I can do a lot of this reconnaissance from a map, and anything that I can't do from a map I could probably finalize with a drone to double check, or possibly updated satellite imagery if I have access to updated satellite imagery. And yeah, so that's terrain analysis that I'm going to utilize to establish my battle plan, right? If I'm going to do that ambush, I'm not just going to like close my eyes and pick a point on the map and go out there, which would be obvious and ridiculous. I'm also not just going to say, all right, we're just going to walk to the road and then stand on the side of the road, and then whenever cars drive by, shoot at them. That's not going to work either, right? So I'm going to have to do terrain analysis and then identify the best spot for me to set up for that ambush, given the other greater MET-TC factors that we're not going to talk about here. Great. That's terrain analysis, kids. I hope you learned something. See you on the next one.